probably a standard report that Chameleon can just like copy in. And
Yeah, you'd have a tweet, I mean, I got stuff all in mine, I mean, and I have add-on forms too that are triggered based on if it's a stray, something else may print, or if it's owner surrender, something else may print. So
They're set up to be
Yeah.
done to get where you guys are,
Oh, yeah.
clearly.
Yeah, are they manually filling something out now?
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
there were a number of
Fill in
pieces
the
in here,
owner
like,
info, everything.
yes. So, and there were a number of pieces in here where it was also clear that we were both doing paper and chameleon record keeping across that. So some of the discrepancies were between both, so the inefficiencies sort of across the board.
And one more question, and this is just something that I thought of after, and I appreciate that the ORE thing was remedied, you know, as soon as you picked up on that. How did it work with actual OREs? So how were they differentiated? If every owner surrender was marked an ORE, how did staff truly know this 12-year-old dog, the request of its owner was that, okay, it's time, I want to use it?
I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I mean, the report talks about they set for
They set.
4 days or.
Well, I
They were
know.
performing them timely.
Yeah. I mean, there's one in there now that was a owner requested, he was waiting. I just saw him when I walked through. I was like, why does he have to wait? And he's just this sweet lab. Oh.
Yeah, I think that's what I would say too, is just, has the ORE issue been remedied?
I was gonna ask, is that still on the form or is it
Can we
off?
trust county right now with ORE?
So I think that, no, I've been very clear at this point in multiple meetings as far as the intake is concerned, that I expect them to be very clear about the difference between ORE and an owner surrender. And that no one is required to check the ORE box unless that's truthfully what they're asking for. I think
Can we
we're
change
very
this
clear.
to
But we have, conversations with the veteran, so I released the audit also to staff on Monday. And so that's the first time the veterinarians and others have seen some of those other recommendations about the timeliness of the way that we've been doing surgeries. So,
Because it's in here, and I know it's something that time we'll get to, but I really feel like if an owner is coming here for their euthanasia, that the animal
Obviously,
really
that
shouldn't
needs to be
even go
done.
in a cage, unless it's a holding cage right outside the vet area, that, you know, their last moment in time should be with their family and their owner, and then right to, unless it's like, there's not a vet here. I mean, obviously then they would feel cold.
Right, a lot of shelters are putting in a compassion room, so that the people who relinquish, if they want to, can actually be with their animal, you know, when it's euthanized.
That's very important for the animal's well-being and the family.
Yeah. So there was a lot in the audit about euthanasia, and I guess that, I mean, I do have the question of, I think it's an open question of, with that, because first, you have to trust that your frontline people are asking the right questions and getting the right information to the relinquisher, and then that the animal's not sitting, which Kim is saying there is one sitting right now. And then also that when they go to the euthanasia room, they're not looking at deceased animals in the youth room. So it sounded like it was like a lot of inhumane, possibly unethical behavior surrounding the ORE process, and you kind of took away the automatic box checking, which is, thank God you did that.
So my concern, I've had a lot of concern about you, go ahead, I'm sorry.
all of the rest of the implementation, recommendations through here are also going to have to be implemented.
But I mean, for me, I found it so highly disturbing that there is a box called ORE and it doesn't even say what it is. Much less they were being forced to check it. I would say that gets stripped off that form. I don't know if you guys sent out a form to a printer or whatever, but I would take that off the form and create a new form.
Well, and Pam makes a really good point, especially since you mentioned a little bit of dissatisfaction with some of the employees right now. They may adamantly do something that I don't feel is ethical, as Pam mentioned, just because of the lack of care, meaning them caring. Because if they're like that when they're happy with their job, what are they gonna be like when they're not happy with what's going on, with the new, things being implemented? It's not gonna make them kinder towards what's going on, it's gonna make them more harsh.
Or just the question of whether county can do everything that you're tasked with doing right now, and if ORE is not a service that you're totally confident about providing from start to finish, maybe there's some other solutions to that in the meantime or something. So I don't think it's that, like, looking at everything and being like, we can handle this and we're gonna mandate this happens, because change is so much harder than mandating something or changing something on a form. But I think it's realistically, I guess my question is, and I don't mean for you to answer it right now, but the question is, can county handle OREs in a humane and appropriate way right now? And if not, like, let's figure out something else, let's take something off the plate. But it's just not clear to me, and there were a lot of other issues around the euthanasia process outside of just owner requested euthanasia. Seems like a lot, like a big area to be ensuring appropriate animal welfare around, in addition to the euthanasia techniques and strategies and intake and all of that. So
The first pieces of it are part of the immediate actions that are part of the first 2 weeks. They're among the highest priorities of the implementation plan, and we'll continue to sort of report back through that. Dr. Baskin has created sort of an accountability matrix that she's discussed with Lee, and as they start implementing through that, they'll continue to sort of show that out in that space. It's going to take time, I think, before there's a sense of trust, and I think it's going to be difficult. I'm open to other options as we get into talking about some of the action plan. We're going to try some additional things, but it's going to take time. But the euthanasia process is among the immediate priorities that need to be addressed within the first 2 weeks. But yeah.
Well, and the staff need to have the support to do the right thing, because, there's lots of eyes watching everything they do, and everybody's talking about it over their breakfast bagel or whatever, and so they're feeling a lot of arrows in the back and everything else, so they need to be supportive in, this is where we are, and here's the path forward, and everybody from this board to volunteers to county government has to support how we get out of this ugly place, so that integrity is supported.
So to preface, a piece of the action plan, part of one of the things that I thought to do about that, and it was came out of our conversations about a director position, as well as about sort of the consultation model and bringing in external expertise, because I don't have internal expertise that I think is necessary to change these levels of policies and procedures, re-educate staff, and do the level of development and support and implementation in a sustainable way. And I think I'm going to have to hire that in from outside. As we went through the director process, and even the director function has such heavy management functions that even that is, difficult to do from that level of leadership. And so I have put together a request for proposals for a contractor. And this is not a contractor that redoes the audit in terms of an evaluation piece. This would be a contractor with some expertise to come in and be spending time in the facility, a lot of time in the facility, particularly through the rest of this fiscal year and into the early next year, to be thinking about for the implementation sections, especially around caregiving and euthanasia and some of those daily SOP pieces that I think I'm going to have to look for external expertise to do that. So I will be seeking a small special appropriation from the council and permission to put an RFP out for that. That means that we can continue sort of the director path on board, utilize a contractor who can do sort of on-the-ground services, spending time doing that ongoing development directly with staff, because I don't have the sufficient leadership internally to run that process. The other biggest section, there are other major findings, but the other biggest section certainly focuses on length of stay and overcrowded facility. All of the caregiving practices, this is the bulk of the recommendations are focused around some of these issues, is overall length of stay. And the length of stay over the course of last year in particular had gotten particularly long.
What is it?
So it's 21 to 22 days on average.
So is that intake to being made available for adoption? Is that intake to?
It's intake to,
You
outcome
mean
path.
disposition?
Yeah. So it's too long in the process before behavior evaluation or some of the medical procedures to take place. It's too long in the process, and so there's, the phrase that comes up repeatedly in audit is that sense of urgency.
Do you think everyone here understands that in sort of a non-threatening way, that they can
Not yet.
integrate it? Not yet.
Not yet.
That's that path I was talking about at the meeting, like what path are they on? Are they on like, this is a easy adoption and let's prioritize surgery and get them out the door, and this one's on a hold, and so they're going over here, and this one needs more behavior evaluation, and so when we can get to that. But some are like a no-brainer adoption candidate, and just get them processed on the floor, get them to surgery and on the floor, in, out. Because then the space
Or
frees
doesn't
up.
anybody can drive that?
Everything everything about that is as chaotic as it is described in this audit is accurate. It is as chaotic as it is described.
Spring, let's talk.
I will, and Paige is great, I think I picked up that she has that sense of urgency and that,
I've had some one-on-one conversations with her.
yeah,
So I'm glad.
let's just get them out, even if they're not on surgery yet, if they're not,
I also, in May, told them that if, after Paige started, I told her that as she was reforming relationships with some of our rescue organizations, that if a rescue organization, preferred or needed heartworm testing or preferred or needed spay and neuter, that we will just do it.
we met with her today, and I'm hopeful that, some of there were just some barriers before that.
Barriers and specific training, and she has done it before at a shelter with volume, so that's been helpful.
Talking about spay and neuter, how does that medical staff feel about implementing some of those or changing when they do things, how they do things?
They also all saw these Monday, so they're still wrapping their heads around that part too. So staff's first experience with this audit was Monday.
In reality too, there are probably a lot of shelters that do spay and neuter 7 days a week, so, there's gotta be some accommodation in larger reality too. We don't do spay and neuter 7 days a week.
Well, I think that there'll be,
3 to 4 days. 5 days a week is.
I think for me, in that space, it would be less about how many days of spay and neutering we were doing versus how quickly we were spaying and neutering and the length of stay. I think it's really difficult because it's difficult to treat in this space. It's not impossible to treat.
And that's
if
one
you
thing
got it.
that I was surprised I didn't see in the shelter space section, which was, I think we're sort of using all the space we have, but there's vector control. And is there any chance that vector control could move to a different facility? One can always hope.
I know, I actually tried. It's only,
Because there's a lot of space at vector control.
no, I actually tried that several months ago to see if
Maybe we
we
could try
had
to
sort
get
of another
another
facility. I already brought it up, and so we don't control our facilities in that way in terms of, so there isn't a single other place that DPH currently occupies that are like the sectors I control that Vector would fit in order to do that. And so we talked to the county about some of the places, and county has a lot of buildings, but most of them are not in a shape with that people could move into. And Vector has some of a little bit of specialty scientific equipment, and that also makes it not that much, a little bit, but I don't have a facility option for them to move to without.
And the reality right now is that it's
$100,000.
not just a space to hold these puppies and medicate them.
The actual care and treatment.
We're not
The actual care and
disinfecting,
treatment.
we're not vaccinating, right, we're not doing so many
The
other
holes,
things.
right?
But it-
That's down the
Piece of the
line.
process.
Right.
I mean, at some point, we're not gonna need as many people as we have when the processes don't use 2 people for one job. And Chameleon is fully implemented, and that will free staff up.
I think so too, and so I think those are improvements, I think, that can be made as to whether or
That's
not
not
we get to
that's
that
not an
point.
immediate thing, but.
I think like improving the efficiency of the operations is gonna really.
Oh my God.
It's gonna free up opportunities left and right. Like, that was
Right.
clear in staffing, which I know that you've mentioned to us before, that's clear
Several
in across,
years.
like, the entire scope of the procedures, and policies, the opportunities for efficiency are everywhere, which should give us the opportunity to find those, like, specializations and services, to find those employees that can be trained, you know, to do additional things, or that we don't need employees